Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder with your host, Mike Haltman. It's the podcast that will answer your questions about many of the things in life we've always wanted to know more about. Our guests, experts in their chosen field, will enlighten us about subjects ranging from real estate, business, career, science, philanthropy, and much more. Proudly presented by Hallmark Abstract Service, it is once again time to sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride on our information superhighway. And now, here's Mike Haltman.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Haltman. Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? I am your host. I'm also the CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service, and I welcome you. One of the purposes of Do You Ever Wonder really is to discuss topics that people really have an interest in. And, we've done a few interesting ones in the past few weeks, but today we're going to talk about the Hamptons and Hamptons real estate, which is a fascinating area of Long Island. If you're not familiar with it, my first taste of the Hamptons came in the 70s and 80s when I was in college and after college, when share houses were a big thing. You'd get a group of 20 people who would pay, I think at the time it wasn't much, $1,200, $2,000 for an entire summer of weekends, and it was phenomenal. And people came out there for the beaches, for the bars, for the social life. Back then, I think Westhampton and Quogue were the big fancy towns. Today, that's not necessarily the case anymore, but I know that the Hamptons have changed quite a bit. And in the last couple of years, in particular with COVID, people have left the city. People have clamored for rentals, which were and probably still are trading at incredible numbers, just so people could get out of the city. Again, for those not familiar, I'm not sure of the exact number, but towns and villages, there's a North Fork, there's a South Fork. Each town, each village has its own personality. And as our guest today will enlighten us on, I'm sure its own unique real estate market, its own unique character of what it takes to get involved in the real estate market. But what fascinates me most now is that the things have changed a little bit. I think that the market's been on a parabolic price rise in the past few years. Recently, we have interest rates rising. We have consumer confidence dropping. There's inventory issues, which have been going on for a while. Not that these factors really come into well, I shouldn't say that. There are people where higher interest rates don't matter because they buy for cash, where consumer confidence doesn't matter because they're in a position in life where I'm sure they're extremely confident. So it's an interesting topic, and I am very happy to introduce today's guest. So she is part of the Compass Covert team in Bridgehampton. She writes for Behind the Hedges. She created the website Hamptons Market Data, which is what originally led me to reach out to her. She's an expert in Hamptons real estate, and she really looks at all aspects of the market. So with all of that said, please welcome Adriana Nava. Welcome, Adriana.
Having me.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So did I misspeak about any of the aspects of the market that are in play today?
Well, first of all, you mentioned that when you were coming out and you were spending about $1,200 to $2,000 for the summer, that's minimum for a weekend now.
And from my understanding, share houses, a lot of town ordinances have changed where they don't really encourage share houses.
That's right. And Southampton Village was the last little hamlet that was holding out on implementing a rental registry and disallowing short-term rentals, but that's all now changed too. The character of the Hamptons has really changed. And what we see now when you walk around, there is a large portion of homeowners here. I will venture a guess, definitely before my time of being out here, when you were here, you probably encountered a lot of other renters and tenants like playing around when you were out here. It's not that way anymore. It's families, it's, people wanting to come and relax and get away from it all. Like, it's nice to go to a party like here and there. And there's definitely still the networking component of the Hamptons is extremely intact. But just like everything else that has evolved in, our lifetimes, the dynamic of that has certainly changed. There's still a large number of tenants. The number of tenants we have is higher than we've ever had. I would have to double check with Stay Marquee. I definitely don't do everything all alone. And I do lean on them for rental numbers, which we don't have great data in the Hamptons. So I take it from wherever I can get it that it's good. And then I had to create my own, unfortunately, but also fortunately. It's given me a lot of ability to see these insights, which doesn't make me smarter than everyone. It's just about having the information available.
Well, information is king in pretty much everything we do. So when I was out there as a summer rental, and by the way, one of the houses was on Dune Road, on the ocean, in the washout area, on stilts, and it was still $1,200 for the summer. Phenomenal. Yeah, my sliding glass door opened up on the ocean. It was really incredible, but you really didn't think about people buying back then. It didn't seem like it didn't seem like it does now. Now it seems like a lot of people just want to own. And like you said, the rental or the seasonal rental market is not what it used to be. So it is more families and more of a homey feel, which I would imagine that the locals who are there year round would appreciate.
This summer is the summer we're going to tell, because I think this summer is the first summer that the Hamptons is really going to be allowed to be its new character. That hasn't happened yet. It's been developing since the markets have changed in a way that people have really started paying attention to them. It's not played out yet. So time's going to tell. And a lot of people do ask me, like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I'll tell you right now, the Hamptons has a massive hangover from the party over the last couple of years.
The price party.
No, the volume, the doing, the this, the that, right? And there's just been so much extra activity that people, if you want to put it like really big picture as a society, are not used to doing so intensely together for so long.
Right.
And we're starting to sense people just taking a little bit of a break. But we also have to remember that unlike the 2008 market that everybody loves to keep referencing, it's totally different because that was all borrowed money. People talked about smoke and mirrors back then. There's no smoke and mirrors right now. It's people in cash we're talking about. It's not borrowed money. This is the investment that people believed in and made in for themselves.
Well, and even if it is borrowed money, I think that the underwriting parameters are much different as well. So I agree, it's nowhere near anything like 2008. Agreed. And so when you talk about hangover, I know I have a lot of friends, or I have friends who own houses in the Hamptons and spent a lot of COVID out there. And that entailed a lot of enjoying life, which is a nice way to be. But now you think that people like that, that it's going to be more of a realization for people who were out there on a more permanent basis when normally they would be living somewhere else, and come out on weekends. So now when you say this summer will be the realization of what's going to be, what the Hamptons will be, is that based on the fact that those same people won't necessarily have the energy to do what they've been doing for 2 years?
No, I think it's a renewed energy.
Okay.
Yeah. So like almost thinking about like taking a power nap. right? You're a little tired, you need a quick nap to recharge, and then you're going to go right back out to it. I do a lot of other market research other than just look at spreadsheets and numbers. And a lot of what I've been hearing about people, or hearing about from people, is they know what their lives are going to look like now. They know they're going to go back to Europe for a week or two this summer. They're not sure if it's going to be a week or two, depending how things shake out, or maybe what their college or young adult age kids do. They want to leave a little flexibility, but they're resuming their lives the way they like to live it. And a lot of them say things to the effect of, you know, we've been all over the place for the last 10 years as a family, and this is the first time ever in decades where we actually got a year where we were all like in the same house maybe, or in the same town. And it's actually really nice, and we enjoyed it, and we kind of want to live in it for a little while.
It was a gift, actually. So I have 3 kids who were out of the house, and during COVID, they came back to the house, and it was phenomenal, which it had nothing to do with real life. It's something that should never have happened, but it was phenomenal. So
people are absorbing that and figuring out how to retain some of that as they go forward. And as they do that, well, this is just what I believe from what I've seen and what I hear people talk, but I believe as they do that, we will see a new energy. People will start feeling more confident. I think you mentioned something about confidence earlier. People will start feeling more confident and continuing to make moves. May get a little quiet in real estate. Some reason things kind of trickle down from the Hamptons or out, I should say. So don't be surprised if in your market you might see a little bit of a pause, because it is tiring, you know, but don't necessarily think that means that things are going to start tanking, you know.
But we are definitely seeing a pause. I mean, when you put, not a pause, but we've seen anecdotally, we've seen a slowdown, but when you look at the sheer volume of the last 12 to 18 months, it's only natural that you're going to see a slowdown. And when it goes to consumer confidence, I think there's definitely a difference in the demographic of the Hamptons, which is kind of like almost a world unto itself, and the consumer confidence elsewhere, whether Long Island or the rest of the country.
100%. You're right about that. It led me to another thought, and I forgot what it was because I was listening to what you were going to say, or what you're saying.
My thought was very prophetic. That'll take anyone's thinking away. But, well, let's go to this. So I read about your first real estate transaction, and it was fascinating because you were kind of young at the time, and B, in terms of the rest of the story, talk about that for a second.
Sure. I fell into my first transaction, and I didn't get paid on it because I wasn't even licensed. I was living in England, and I grew up in London. I don't have an accent. I went to an American school. I was the youngest, and when I was in 12th grade, they wanted to downsize from the home we grew up in, knowing that I would be the last one off to college the next year. And we're having a hard time figuring out what that would look like for them. They knew they wanted to be closer into the city of London. They knew they wanted to maintain some roots to what was familiar to them in the neighborhood that we had lived in for so long. And the prices then were very expensive. By the way, my parents bought their first house at 15% interest, so people can calm down a little bit. They survived, so will you.
Well, just to interject for a second, when I graduated from undergrad in 1980, and my first job was at a mutual fund company. Money markets at the time were 18%. So indeed. Yeah. These interest rates at 5% for 30-year are still quite reasonable.
Yeah, it's all about perspective, and that is leading me to the thought that I forgot.
Great.
Tracking from myself for a minute. There are a lot of new people who have never touched real estate before in their lives, now finding themselves property owners, property investors. Don't be surprised if you find things seem a little bit wonky in your market for a little bit as these people figure out like how to do it and whether they want to do it. And that's one thing that I think is getting a little, or has the risk, how about that? Has the risk of getting lost if we're not careful as professionals about educating people, which is why when you asked me if I was interested in this, I jumped right away because I see how you're educating people. And I think more of us as professionals need to do that because it is important to helping this sort of new energy develop into an educated one, not another one that's going to cause a 2008 to happen. We're okay right now. Things are in flux, but it's all going to shake out fine as long as the people whose job it is to educate and move people along the right direction really buckle down and do their jobs right now. It's been a little bit of an easy street for people because things were just happening for a couple of years. And yeah, it was crazy and people were running around like chickens with their heads cut off. But if you really think about it, it wasn't that hard. Now it's going to be a little bit harder. And when you don't have the perspective of multiple cycles, it can feel really ominous. But I really just want to tell people, use this opportunity, if you don't mind, don't go down into the worst place. It's not like that when things just start to calm down. It's what just came out of was very unusual. It's like a once in a lifetime occurrence, really, or twice or whatever. But just because things are calming down a little bit doesn't mean it's going bad. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, there's no question that the people who are relatively new to the market are going to find out that not every house that you have listed is going to get 15 offers for $100,000 over asking. And your point to psychology and mentality is very true. I was after I got out of business school, I was a bond trader, and then I was an equity trader. And I then taught traders. And what I used to teach was that when you're doing well, you're not the best. And when you're doing horribly, you're not the worst, and that it's important to maintain an even keel. And whether you're selling real estate or selling oranges on the street, whatever it is that you're doing, it's important to maintain an even keel in your mind. So your point is very well taken. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see if and when the market does slow down and work is entailed. I mean, I remember the days when people would have to go house to house, putting flyers in mailboxes. Do you want to? Although I guess they still do it now, trying to get houses because the inventory is so low. But it's work. It's definitely work. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting. So how long have you been in the business in the Hamptons?
So I again fell into it here as well. So I'll backtrack a little. So my parents couldn't figure it out, so I figured it out for them. And one of my good friends his parents were moving out of the country after he graduated because that's where their family was in their timelines with the kids and everything. And my parents, I had heard them over the years talk about a townhouse development that my friend had been renting in with his parents had, because we were still in high school. And I was sitting his house, helping him pack up his room. And he was telling me about how his parents are really stressed because they still have a few months on the lease, but they need to leave now. And it's like expensive. They're moving. It's just all this extra cost. And it really is stinky for them. Like that's, he was going on his commentary and I just said, huh. So I said to my mom, what do you think about, my friend Jordan's unit? And it's really funny because he had put a hole in the wall and I helped him spackle it up so that the new new people, or, the landlord wouldn't find out. We did it the right way based on the lease, the terms of the lease or whatever. But he needed help to do it. He didn't want his parents to endure yet another cost, with everything else that was going on. And he said, I just really hope that whoever moves into the room next doesn't find out about this. And I was like, yeah, I really hope so too. I moved into the room next.
That's funny. That's funny. But you know what? The moral of your story is that it's critical to listen.
Yes.
To like what I do in my business is I try and put people together who I think could do business together potentially, but the only way you can do that is to really listen to what people say. So by being a good listener at an early age, you got into your first real estate transaction. That's great.
I made a new friend a few weeks ago, and it's been a lot of fun getting to know this friend, and who said to me, how do you respond to me all day long? Don't you have to work? And I said, oh, honey, don't you understand that I am working? Like every conversation, you're helping people achieve their goals, because a lot of times they don't know what they are. And in real estate, those things develop for a long time over time. And sometimes it takes 20 years of listening to then one day sit somebody down and say, you need to move to Pittsburgh,
Right. No doubt. No doubt. So those are great attributes to have. So now, what moved you to start Hamptons Market Data?
I fell into this market through my own journey of being a mom. And I started open houses simply as a way to get out of the house and mingle with adults for like an hour during the day when my child was an infant, which is, I found out that I do love real estate almost as much as my child. And it became a full-time job within 2 weeks. I'm not somebody who's going to start something unless I'm going to take it all the way. And I immediately started I got a really good piece of advice from somebody. The only way to win in real estate is to do better than everybody else.
True.
And I think that can be said for a lot of professions.
Title insurance.
So I started looking for how to do that. And it took me 10 years to figure it out, but market data, because it didn't exist. And
so you filled a need.
Yeah. We had someone who was wondering why, his rental got an offer, but not the price, blah, blah, there's wondering what was going on with the listing. It took me 11 hours to figure out it was a design flaw, to dig through the data to figure that out. Right. So it's not so easy. And I watched agents struggle. I struggled, and I really paid attention, and I really listened, and I asked a lot of questions, and I figured out what it was that people needed that wasn't there. And I wasn't really set out to do things better than anyone else. I just wanted to know how that was done so that it could be done,
So now, does Hamptons Market Data, does that drive people to you as a real estate agent?
Do you know, I've not used it for that. I actually built it for real estate agents.
Okay. Well, I saw that you have a lot of testimonials from real estate agents.
Yeah, I built it for real estate agents because I listened to them cry for so long because they didn't have it. I mean, they didn't realize that they were crying because they didn't have it, but I heard what they weren't saying, right? All of it came down, all the problems that not all of them, it's two things, data and ethics, right? So the two major problems, data, access to it, they need it, ethics, not enforced, need to be, right? So two biggest pain points in my market, in my industry, I started thinking a lot about them immediately. I've not gotten so far on the ethics, but I have learned, including very recently, that people do tend to find a way to bring themselves down if you just keep focusing on what the right path is.
So now you do the market data.
Mm-hmm.
don't charge for it,
Nope.
which is interesting. You
Thanks
you
for listening to
provide
Do You
the information gratis to your competitors.
I would prefer to work with smarter people personally.
Okay. That says it all. So now, incredibly, we're like well into into the episode where it will end soon, but the market is very, would you call the Hamptons market fragmented? Or, there's so many different villages and towns, each one somewhat different than the other. Is it a fragmented market, or is it just a diverse market?
It's a very diverse market. Thank you for using that word, because I was thinking like, oh my gosh, how am I going to answer that? But that's the answer. It's a very diverse market. It's very different from town to town, but it's not. You're going to find the same types of things to enjoy. They just vary a little bit from place to place. So like Wainscott is a little bit more woodsy. You're going to find a little bit more moss. The properties tend to be a little bit more natural. People don't do as much landscaping because of the way that neighborhood just naturally is so beautiful that people appreciate about it. But some people will walk onto like a front yard area that has some moss in it and say, where are the pesticides and where's the lawn?
Right.
And they belong somewhere else, and there's no right or wrong. All of it is beautiful. And that's the one thing that I love about the Hamptons. It draws the most interesting people from the most interesting places, and there is something for everyone. You just have to be able to afford it.
Well, I like Greenport, and I don't like Southampton as much because I'm more basic, and Greenport seems to be, to me, more of a basic town, whereas Southampton is more of a Kardashian town. So there's that. I would imagine Easthampton, there's some towns that you would think of in a certain way, celebrity, wealth, that kind of thing. And then there are others that you think of in terms of a little more down to earth. So that's part of the diversity.
And I would just encourage people, that's a very astute observation. And I would just encourage people to be open-minded about those past stereotypes of different places, because as you had brought up before, things really are changing. I think this summer we'll have a lot more answers after this summer about what it really will be like in the future. And, that conversation about what defines the Hamptons has been going on for a really long time. And to your point, I think people shouldn't shut out things like the North Fork, because the people who keep coming out here, it's just more and more people all the time, because people do start to see that diversity is there, and it is getting bigger just as the population is getting larger. The North Fork towns are a lovely option. It's beautiful. I go there specifically for a different experience, to sit on, to sit by the carousel, to, visit a friend, go to a different restaurant, but it all still feels very much part of the experience.
But it's more, and again, I don't know, I'll throw it at you. It's quieter on the North Fork.
I've got to tell you that, I'll be honest, I would have to check in with my North Fork about that. It's been pretty hectic up there from what I can gather. It's gotten to a point, I think, where, people are getting priced out of there too.
Really?
Yeah.
It's interesting, but I think that, you bring a lot to the table for anyone who's interested in Hamptons real estate. And if somebody wanted to find you, what's the best way for somebody to find you?
hamptonsmarketdata.com.
Okay, that's great. And if someone wants,
or LinkedIn, you can Google me, Adriana Nava, I'll pop up. I'm not the nurse in Chicago, I'm the other one.
Okay. I'm the only Michael Haltman. So if anyone needs me out there, I'm right there. But
Michael, what I love about what you do, if you don't mind me taking a second, I picked my first title person, and I wasn't told that I was allowed to do that. And it caused a lot of problems because I was expecting the attorney to be like, hey, we're ready for title. Who do you want to use? But I never got that call. I just got a call like, oh, your title came back.
Right.
And I said, no, but I have somebody for that. Oh, and people don't usually, but they won't because you don't ask. Right.
Well, you know what?
It was a problem. It was a problem, not on that house. On another house, I made the mistake of not picking my title person and just going with the bank one. And then when I went to refinance, we had a title issue that needed to be cleaned up. It wasn't a big one. It was small. It was easy to fix, but I sat back and I said, I didn't pick that person.
Right. No, there's no question. And we can go into a whole discussion about it,
Yeah.
like conflicts of interest and a whole bunch of different things. But, you talk about education, and I spend a lot of my time trying to educate people. And because you're buying $1 million or a $2 million property, the first time someone tells you about title insurance is when they say, write a check for $6,000 to ABC Title. And, in a society where people spend, 9 hours trying to figure out where they can buy a TV for $5 less, when it comes to protecting what for a lot of people is going to be their most valuable asset, it really doesn't make sense not to do a little research into that too.
If I could give anybody any advice right now, just based on where things are, there are people, I'm sorry to say, in my profession, as I'm sure there are in yours, as there are in other professions, whose only goal is to take from you. Work really hard to find people like me and Michael who are working to protect you. Right. You have worked too long and hard for all this money that you're now wondering what to do with.
No question.
Do not make the mistake of listening to someone who's only interested in how it can help them. Well, and you don't know that. They feel it and they don't listen to it, in their gut.
I agree. And what we always stress as a firm is that while we get a lot of our business from attorneys, the attorney's not our client. The buyer is our client, and we go to the end to make sure that they're protected, because that's our job. So, it's not our job. I don't know if we don't do a lot in the Hamptons, but I don't know if you have boundary line agreement issues out there.
Always.
Okay. So, it's a work in progress to get it resolved in a lot of cases. And an attorney might say, listen, the neighbor will just sign an affidavit and that'll be fine. And you know what? It's not fine. So we don't accept that. We go through the boundary line agreement process, but the attorneys go crazy.
Wow. You're going to have to take a look at this house I'm sitting in then, because that's not the process we were told, Michael.
You signed it? Your neighbor signed an affidavit?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, an affidavit can be okay, but if your neighbor sells their house, the affidavit doesn't hold with the new owner. I just lost Adriana.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. But that's the issue. That's the issue that forces us to be somewhat adamant on a boundary line agreement.
As much as I know, buddy, I did not know that. And as much as you think there's always something more you can learn.
I forget the politician who said, every man is my teacher in that I might learn from them. But today would be every man or woman is my teacher. But yes, but no, it's an interesting thing because we come up on boundary line issues all the time.
Mm.
And the path of least resistance is the affidavit. But in any event, we have to wrap up, but I would love to have you come on another time because there are issues that I had that I wanted to speak about that we didn't get a chance to speak about. So I hope that'll be possible sometime in the future.
Absolutely. I very much enjoyed chatting with you, and I look forward to seeing more of your successes, because your successes means that there's going to be hundreds more out there from all of these efforts that you're putting out, educating people.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And you keep up the great work that you're doing as well.
Thank you. It was great talking with you.
All right, you too.
Thanks for listening to Do You Ever Wonder? And if there's a subject that's always been on your mind, let us know. We hope you'll join us next time for the show that answers your questions. And please like and share this episode with your friends and on your social media. See you next time.